Good afternoon. Welcome to the weekly edition of The Wrap. I'm Laura Leslie, WRAL Capitol Bureau Chief.
And I'm Brian Murphy, someone who helps out with the Capitol coverage.
The man of all trades, exactly. It helped a lot this week. It's been a very, very busy week this week, obviously. One of the big issues this week is the budget. We finally got a budget after all this time. It sort of popped in out of nowhere.
Yeah, this one-year budget to fill the gap and try to decide what to do with this $1 billion surplus. And the week started with the House saying, hey, here's our budget. And the week ended with basically the House and the Senate saying, hey, we'll see you guys later.
Yeah, the Senate. So the House brought its budget out after negotiations. I guess there were weeks of negotiations and they just didn't go well. They came to a kind of ground to a halt. So the Senate put its budget out. And then later, it was Thursday morning, I guess it was, the Senate put its own version of a budget out. So it's kind of like now both sides are saying, oh, well, now we don't know where this is going.
The crazy thing to me, and I'm somewhat of an outsider on some of this, is we're in the exact same position we were at the beginning. Like, we knew there was going to be a surplus. We knew the House and the Senate would have different priorities. That's what they're supposed to have been working on for these last 3 months. And now they've just put it out publicly. And so we could all see the differences that they have. But we're in the same position. The House and the Senate are going to have to come together at some point, or just throw their hands up and say, we won't fix it. We'll just keep the budget as it is, and we'll roll into 2025.
And that's a possibility that Senator Berger has actually put out there more than once, and his staff. But I have a hard time seeing them leaving without doing something about child care and something about the vouchers, because those are two things that I think both sides have agreed that they really want to do. One is put a whole bunch more money into the voucher program. You might remember last year they removed the income cap and a lot of the other sort of guardrails that kept us restricted to certain lower income families. And now, the demand suddenly sort of blew the top off this thing, and now they're trying to put an extra $500 million in it or so to try to cover all those applicants who put in and didn't get any scholarships.
What's interesting to me is I think the Senate has kind of the upper hand because they've included much of the same things that the House has and said, hey, look, you're in favor of private school vouchers, $463 million. You're in favor of childcare, putting $136 million to help this funding cliff that it looks like it's going to happen when the federal money runs out. You're in favor of $150 million for this road outside of the Toyota manufacturing plant in Randolph County. All right, we're in favor of those too. You're in favor. We're in favor. Let's pass it. What it doesn't account for is that the House would like to give slightly larger raises to workers, to teachers and state employees. They also have some policy stuff in there when it comes to maybe holding prosecutors, having more oversight over prosecutors who decide not to charge protesters. There's something about an engineering school at UNC. So theirs is a little more robust, but what the Senate has basically said is, hey, we agree on these things. We agree on spending. Let's just pass that and get out of here.
Right. And we have not, we haven't heard a good argument from the House thus far about why they feel like it's okay to spend more money. But the Senate is saying, we don't want to dip into reserves. They actually compromise a little bit because they did dip into reserves a little bit in the budget that they put out on Thursday, but not to the extent that the House would in order to pay for those raises. I think it's about a $300 or $400 million difference there. So
yeah, Senator Berger says it's a $528 million difference between the two budgets in total spend. Speaker Tim Moore had said they're only $30 million apart at one point, and to which Senator Berger replied, you might want to buy a calculator. Speaker Moore also said, hey, maybe we need a cooling off period here. And so it's possible they may not even be back until September.
Yeah, it's possible. But they will be back next week. And one thing that we know they're going to be taking up is constitutional amendments. We saw those roll out this week. It was, just yesterday, Thursday. They rolled out in the Senate Elections Committee. A couple of them are just sort of basically putting into the Constitution things that are already in law, right? Like one of them is saying you have to have a copy of your photo ID in order to vote absentee by mail, which is already law.
Yeah, Will Doran, our colleague, made some interesting points about this, that both the income and the voter ID, the income tax and the voter ID, have been challenged, saying, hey, well, the legislature was elected through gerrymandered districts, and so some of the work that they did should not stand. This would kind of go back on those and say, all right, well, we'll pass them again, and we'll show you.
Right, but the income tax cap is different because
it would be lower.
That would have been 7. It was 7 in the one that passed. Now they want to knock it down to 5. I think we're about at 4.25 right now. So that would really limit it. And I'm not sure that one has the support it would need in the House Republican caucus to get through.
Yeah, and the other one is the citizens voting, which is already in the Constitution. This would clean up the language, I guess, a little bit,
Well,
make it
more to the point, it would motivate voters, right?
Right.
You would get your Republican base out because you're talking about photo ID, you're talking about immigration, you're talking about taxes. These are all the things that the base voters really care about. So.
The problem is, and just if you're the Republicans, the problem is you have a supermajority, but it's a very narrow supermajority. You can't afford to have a single vote missing in the House unless you can bring some Democrats over to override a veto. And in the summertime, it's hard to get every single person there. These lawmakers have plans. They were told we'll be done at the end of June. Make your vacation plans, make your medical plans. We've been told that some people have medical procedures planned. So it's going to be really tough for them to have all 72 that they need there on the same day.
Right, and it's actually harder than a veto because a veto requires only 3/5 of the members present and voting, right? But a 3/5, it's 3/5 period for a constitutional amendment, so you can't sort of get around this by having a couple of Democrats absent on the same day,
Yeah, and the other issue is this would have to happen somewhat quickly because these would need to be on the ballot. Like there's going to come a time where the ballot has to be finalized, and these need to be shipped off to the printer and then mailed out for absentee ballots and all of that stuff.
In the meantime, other really interesting stuff happening this week. Marijuana's back. Hey, once again, it's like Lazarus, right? It comes back every so often. Senator Bill Rabin put it into a bill that this House leadership really wants that would regulate CBD sales and tax them. That's a bill that House Majority Leader John Bell has a particular interest in because he is in the business, of course. So the House is really backing this regulation bill. But Rabin basically just put his his compassionate care, I think he called it, medical marijuana bill into it, and they just sent it back to them yesterday.
I've never seen, I mean, maybe never is a strong word, but this was as passionate a speech as I've seen anyone give in a state legislative context, and particularly the speech that Rabin gave in committee.
Right.
Where he just went after people who were against this and relied on his personal experience as someone who faced cancer, who was given only months to live, who used marijuana to help his treatment against the law, as he admitted. But very sharp testimony, or a testimony. It was really a testimony. I don't know if it moved any votes because then people turned around and voted against it, but it really was stirring. It was a stirring speech. Will it change the math on this? We don't know because Tim Moore says, even though I'm personally in favor of this, the caucus is not, and so we'll have to see what the caucus wants to do. But it was interesting because it's not just marijuana and cannabis. There was vaping. There are all kinds of things. All of a sudden, people are very interested in regulating this.
Yeah, it's
stuff.
it's that time of year when things just sort of like pop up out of nowhere. The big surprise this week, aside from marijuana, of course, was vaping. So this basically is a bill that would ban almost all vaping liquids that are currently sold in stores, except for ones that have FDA approval, and those are mostly owned and produced by American-made tobacco companies, right? And those are some of the groups who are lobbying real hard for this bill. But they say, the argument they're making is not crazy. I mean, they say, we've got people putting this stuff in their lungs that's coming over from overseas. We have no idea what's even in this stuff.
Yeah, it's really hard to argue against this, which basically says, hey, we're going to create a list of all of the products that have been approved by the FDA, and those are the only products stores can sell. There's been some pushback from convenience store owners and other vape shops who say this will really hurt our business. But when you break that argument down, you realize, well, what will hurt their business is they won't be able to sell these unauthorized products anymore. This is a protection of kids issue, and that's the way the senators have pitched it. Some have said, well, it's not really small government. But on the other hand, if kids are being sickened by taking some of these products, and we've heard of some instances of that, well, that seems like a legitimate use of government oversight.
Yeah, and I will say, you do hear, and if you ever go into vape shops, I don't know if you do, but there are all kinds of products there that clearly don't follow the guidelines that are, in America about, what you can flavor things with, what you can, So, if there's no, the question I have, I guess, is who's going to enforce this?
Well, that's a good question, but there are strict penalties for the shops that sell this. They could get their license suspended or eventually revoked, I guess, if they find products that are. This would make it a state law. This is part of the issue, right? The FDA creates this list, but the FDA isn't going around checking every gas station, convenience store in North Carolina. Why Senator Michael Lee wants to make this a state law is then the state could then enforce it somehow, whether that's the ABC Commission, whether that's some sort of highway patrol. I don't know who would be the actual enforcement mechanism, but there would be a state law. And it would be pretty easy, I think, for average citizens to walk in and say, wait a second, you're selling popcorn-flavored vape fluids? I don't think that's illegal.
No, yeah, exactly. So anyway, so the vaping, both of those bills got their initial Senate approval on, well, I think vaping finally got final approval, I think, as well on Thursday. I think the marijuana bill needs one more vote on Monday night before it goes. But anyway, Monday night, the Senate is going to vote on the budget at 7, and we're going to take a break for just a minute here, and we're going to come back and talk about Dale Folwell and the Cooper veto. All right, welcome back to this week's wrap. I'm Laura Leslie here with Brian Murphy talking about the week that was on Jones Street. Big news this week that WRAL broke, actually, that Treasurer Dale Folwell is under investigation by the Wake County DA.
Yeah, this is over the unauthorized use of a state vehicle, the same thing that brought down Beth Wood. Some would argue that Beth Wood had other problems when piled all together.
She didn't drive the car on top of anything,
that was sort of the culmination for Beth Wood.
Yes.
But this comes as a surprise, I think, because Folwell has branded himself as good government guy, a steward of resources. That's how he ran for governor. That's sort of been his reputation as treasurer. And now maybe he was driving a state-owned vehicle places he shouldn't have been. Nothing nefarious, it seems like, but maybe it has run afoul of the rules.
It's not clear, though. I mean, we interviewed Beth Wood, former we just mentioned, and she mentioned that they go by what they're being told by their staff, their internal staff, and she's not sure whether rules have changed or whether enforcement has changed. She said she's pretty sure she doesn't think he did anything wrong. She's pretty sure that he's like such a by the book guy, which he's known to be. So we'll have to see. He says he's done nothing wrong, of course, and the investigation's ongoing, and no charges have been filed yet. But a surprising development there for us.
Yeah, and I think one thing this may lead to eventually is, should we look at these rules? I mean, times have certainly changed where you're connected to your phone, you're getting emails, you're getting calls at whenever. And so when are you off duty? When are you on duty, particularly if you're an elected state official? So I do think maybe the outcome of all this, aside from Folwell, will be a re-examination of what are the rules for state employees who have one of these vehicles.
And what's realistic.
Right, and what needs to be changed.
Yeah. Also, today, actually, Governor Roy Cooper vetoed the bill. That was the bill that we covered ad nauseum, it seemed like forever. So this is the bill that would have banned masks, except now it only bans cloth masks, I guess, and also put new rules on protests. And then they also amended it to put a new campaign finance, basically make it easier for out-of-state donors to give large amounts of money anonymously to campaigns here in North Carolina. The governor today, not surprisingly, vetoing that, partly because of the mask stuff, partly because of the protest stuff, and partly because of the campaign finance stuff.
Right. I mean, this was, we knew that. I think had it just been the mask stuff, there may have been. We'll see. It's hard to tell. But once the campaign finance stuff got in there, and many Democrats and outside observers think this was done to help the Mark Robinson campaign, which has been a little behind in fundraising, get vast sums of outside money and not have to report who that is. Whether that's true or not, that certainly seems to be the intent, or at least people think it's the intent.
The timing certainly makes it look like it might be.
And so once that was added in, I don't think there was any chance this was not going to be vetoed. It'll be interesting to see if the Republicans can override that veto, because there was Republican outcry, Aaron Paré, for one, over the mask part of this. She helped get the mask part changed. Republican opposition helped get the mask part changed to add in the fact that you could wear a medical grade mask.
Right.
You still can't wear a cloth mask, which is what most people wear.
Right. Will, our colleague Will Dorn, had a great story this week about building on Indian burial grounds.
Yeah, and I would encourage you to go read it. I sat through a committee. I'm still not 100% sure, but there is a bill that would make this more public. So, or at least more known to developers. So
Yes.
in this case, there's a developer who wants to build houses. Turns out there is an ancient Indian burial ground on the land, and now trying to figure out exactly what to do there.
Yeah, one senator had run a bill basically that would have allowed him to go ahead and build on it anyway. This caused national and international outcry, and so that bill was amended this week to sort of remove that provision and say, well, we need more transparency from the Department of Natural and Cultural Resources to tell us when we are in areas that may have these kind of archaeological, interest, pieces. But how would you know?
Right. And that's part of the problem. So the easy part would be, hey, this land has, is archaeologically sensitive, or we think maybe historically sensitive. But there's concern about making that totally public because of grave robbers and those who might go and try to dig something up or deface the property. So what they're trying to figure out is a way to let developers know, hey, don't buy that land because of this, if you want to build on it, because it may not be available for building, without letting the entire public know, hey, there's this culturally sensitive land that, people wanting to do bad things may go check it out. So they're really trying to walk a tight line here, and it doesn't seem like anyone did anything wrong. But how do you avoid this problem in the future?
Right. And then we should also mention next week, the debate, the first presidential debate, is going to be on Thursday. President Biden and First Lady Jill Biden are going to be visiting the state on Friday.
I think this points to just how important North Carolina has become to the Biden strategy. Certainly,
I feel like they get in the mail here. I mean, they're
if you look at the polling, the Sun Belt states that helped deliver Biden the presidency, Georgia, Arizona, and Nevada in particular, seem to be slipping away. And so the only path for Biden seems to be through the Rust Belt, that Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin route. And so I think the Biden campaign is kind of looking for a new path to give themselves some options. And North Carolina would certainly be that. I think they see possibly, look, the governor's race has gone Democrat. Even while Trump was winning, you have a candidate in Trump who may turn off some Republican voters. You have a candidate in Robinson who may turn off some Republican voters. Maybe the Biden campaign thinks North Carolina gives them another out on a path to 270.
Right, but I mean, they're all in on North Carolina. I mean, I've never seen anything like this, a sustained focus. Like, we had the second gentleman here this week for Juneteenth, along with the DNC chair, Jamie Harrison, was here.
And I believe the vice president was in Charlotte.
Yeah, I mean, there's somebody every week from high up in that campaign, and I'm not talking about surrogates. I'm talking about like the real deal.
Yeah, I think it's an easy trip.
Yeah,
it's an easy trip, and it's an important state, and it's one that I think polling hasn't indicated that Biden's in the lead by any stretch.
No.
But polling has shown that Josh Stein in the governor's race may have a small lead. And so I think when they look at the map, they see North Carolina as a potential state. Maybe there's just enough highly educated voters, or maybe there's a large enough African-American population.
It's also a lot of demographic change because we're growing so quickly, and a lot of the people who are moving here from bluer areas of the country. So that might be something that they're banking on. Also, it's becoming, we're getting more and more young people in. So
yeah, it's certainly a story, I think, between now and November, how the Biden campaign has sort of targeted North Carolina as maybe the next state to flip. There was a lot of talk after Virginia turned blue that North Carolina would turn blue, and Georgia did turn blue.
I know.
Or at least parts of Georgia, or,
right?
In certain races, Georgia's turned blue, but North Carolina never did. I know that's a frustration to many Democrats.
Absolutely. I think that's about it for me for this week. Anything you wanted to add?
Well, just that, the election bill, there are a lot. This is that time of year, right? Next week is going to be that time of year where they're trying to get out of here. I believe we're going to see a lot of stuff get stuck into other bills as they play this end game, try to pass as many bills as possible before the July 4th weekend and before they may go away for several months.
They might. I'll believe that when I see it, but it's a possibility, right? All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us this week on The Wrap, and stay tuned. We will catch you up next week.